The old Kentucky wonder, string bean. Yes,
Hold that mule or get back and I'll give them to you.
I'll do it, boy. Sure will.
Every time I do this song here, I have a fit, and I feel one coming on right now. Hang on, children.
In the darkness, as String Bean entered the house with his pistol in hand, the men were ready for him. There was a struggle and shots were fired. String Bean was on the floor when the killer finished him off. Outside, a terrified Estelle got out of the car. Knowing that Estelle was waiting outside, the killer went after her with his gun. He fired a shot which hit her in the shoulder.
That took her down to the ground, to her knees. He ran up to her. He took her purse, and at the same time, she's begging him for her life, and he shot her anyway. He shot her in the head, and you know, that's one killing of the many that I investigated while I was with the police department that I'll never understand.
Early the next morning, Grandpa Jones went over to String Bean's cabin. He had a sense that something was wrong, but no idea just how wrong. There was no smoke coming from the chimney. A late autumn frost covered the ground and the body of Estelle Aikman.
The dew had settled on her clothing, her coat, and she looked very lonely out here.
Inside the cabin, police found the body of String Bean face down on the floor in front of the cold fireplace.
When I walked in the door, looked in the door and saw him, is that his right hand was down, and you could tell by the shape of the hand that he had been holding a gun, and they took the gun right out of his hand.
The cabin had been torn apart, the phone lines cut, as the killers searched for the money. Ironically, in the pocket of String Bean's bib overalls was more than $3,000 in cash. The robbers missed it. And they missed $2,000 more hidden in Estelle's bra. All they got was a chainsaw and a few guns, including the revolver they took from the dead hand of String Bean. The headlines rocked Nashville. The close-knit country music family had been brutally violated, shaken to the core with the idea that murder could happen to such nice people with such cruel suddenness.
I couldn't comprehend it. My mind just would not accept the fact that he was gone, first of all, and that he had been murdered. And it really, really just hit me hard.
There were lots of tears, lots of tears. There were days that Grandpa couldn't even come to work. It took a while. It did. It's, you know, you think this can't happen to us, to our family, you know, to our little band of people. But, you know, life touches everyone, it does. And the sad thing about that is in life, death is part of that.
He knew what his schedule was. He didn't go out to dinner after the Opry. He always came home. They were waiting for him. And they shot String when he went in the house. And according to the law enforcement, according to them, Estelle tried to run away, and she was on her knees begging for mercy when John Brown shot her in the back of the head, execution style. He took their lives. He took the lives of two beautiful, kind, gentle people that had befriended him. And they will never breathe another breath of free or fresh air. Mr. Brown was convicted, tried and convicted of these murders. And he was sentenced to 198 years. And I want him to serve every second of those 198 years. I don't want him to ever breathe another breath of free air again as long as he lives.
So and then we're going through. And I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry for their pain. I was put in solitary confinement. I was there for 3 years. I had an opportunity at that time to look at my life and just see how screwed up I really was. I was really disgusted at what I seen, and they give me an opportunity to get clean, to give me an opportunity to get sober, and to give me another opportunity is to, once I reviewed my past, my life, I made a commitment and I made some promises. I promised Mr. and Mrs. Aikman 3 things. I promised him I'd never, ever put myself in a position to harm another human being. I promised him that I would do all in my power to improve myself and my community around me. And I promised I'd help anybody that I could help.
Pointing to a shell casing as evidence before we ever removed it from the ground to show where it was at in relationship to her body.
Bobby Green doesn't really need the photographs. He'll never forget that awful November morning in 1973. He was one of the lead detectives investigating the murders of David Stringbean Aikman and his wife Estelle.
The most brutal case I've ever worked.
Stringbean was a country star and comedian famous for his role on Hee Haw. 2 men robbed and murdered Stringbean when he walked inside his home. Estelle tried to run, but one of the killers chased her down and shot her in the temple.
I shot both of them, John Brown. I recovered the bullet from under her head where she was assassinated from the back of her head to the front, still in the ground when I got there.
I was probably 20 feet from Estelle, where her body was laying. I could see frost was on it.
Bobby's brother Jim was a television photographer who was the first member of the media to arrive and the only one who took pictures of the crime scene.
I recognized the gravity of the story as soon as I found out who it was.
Jim and Bobby were disgusted by the crime, but relieved when 2 cousins, John and Douglas Brown, were arrested and convicted. They figured both Browns would die in prison, but they didn't. Today, John Brown was released from prison. Despite being sentenced to 198 years, he was paroled last month. He left jail inside this white van, a free man. David Aikman's life work lives on. But if you weren't around in the early 70s, you probably have no idea just how big a celebrity the man known as Stringbean really was.
He was one of the stars at the Opry, and I mean, people knew him from everywhere.
Native Nashvilleian Buford Toone watched Stringbean at the Grand Ole Opry and is one of the biggest names on the hit TV show Hee Haw.
I had the pleasure of meeting him once, and when he got the name Stringbean, that was a good name for him because he was about as big around as a pencil and big, tall, lanky.
Unfortunately, Toone is also all too familiar with Stringbean's death. He was a Metro police officer when 2 robbers killed the entertainer and his wife after a show at the Grand Ole Opry.
It upset everybody because everybody was wanting to try to solve this case and figure out who it was that would do such a thing.
Investigators quickly arrested 2 cousins, Marvin and John Brown. Toone figured both of Stringbean's killers would die in jail, but that is not the case. On Wednesday, John Brown was paroled. He'll get out of jail in a few weeks.
I don't care whether they think they're rehabilitated or not. He's a crook. He's a murderer. he should be in prison.
Toon believes the parole board's decision is a slap in the face to everyone involved in the case, especially to Estelle Aikman and the man known as String Bean.
Life without parole means life without parole.
There's a hee-haw member that's not with us tonight. His life ended tragically in November of 1973. His name was just plain old String Bean. He was a legend in country music as well as the Grand Ole Opry where he performed every week. He was more than a friend to me. He was like a brother. String was my fishing partner and hunting partner. And he taught me how to find ginseng. You know, that's something that grows out in the woods wild, a herb like. We bought a farm together, the same one he lived his last days on. He told me he wouldn't buy a farm with anybody but me. And we floated so many times on the Harpeth and Stone River. And when we'd catch fish and cook them on the bank, I remember he'd tell me to make him some Agrofortis coffee, and that meant strong coffee. String was a funny man.
Have you heard from home lately?
Yeah, I got a letter from home today.
Let's hear it.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
I got a letter from my heart. Yeah, there it is. You all know my folks, don't you?
Yeah.
We had a good time up there. Let's see what it says. Say, dear String Bean. That's me.
That's you.
Say, they got a smart aleck working at the post office here now. Got a smart aleck. See, I went down and asked him if I had any mail, and he looked at me and said, what's your name? And I said, smart aleck, if I got any mail, my name will be on it.
Yeah. We all on Hee Haw miss him. And I know I do. Hee